will proceed to process transaction state. Here we have disabled it. Let's enable it by clicking on enable activity, or you can use a shortcut for that, Control E. What's the error here? This type, the transaction item we have changed elsewhere, but here also we have to do that particular change. Let's open this particular XAML. Here let's change this to string and save it. If you just move on to this, there's no error, at least here. Sorry, yeah, it's gone right now. Let's pass that variable again, transaction item. Don't let you confuse about this. Okay, the names will be similar, okay, familiar. If it's an in argument, it will have in. Transaction item, because it's a variable, it doesn't have in or out at the beginning of that particular variable name. Okay, moving on. In process, we will have this particular XAML where we are actually doing the heart of the process, which is searching for the recipes. Right now we don't have any imported arguments, but let's open this file and see what's happening inside it. If you can see, we are trying to enter some data into the search bar, right? Once we see if it exists, then we are moving on. We are entering to some data called recipe data. Okay, this is a hard-coded value again over here, which is not a recommended thing. Let's replace this with an argument. Okay, let it be. Come down and create in recipe name. It's an in variable. Just write it down here also. Control space in recipe. Okay, now what we have to do is, this is being called by, let's close all this. Okay, so this is being called by process, right? So here it is available. You have to pass some value to it in this particular flow, but the value of that is available inside this with the name called in transaction item. Just import the arguments and pass this variable which contains the recipe name. So in turn, this will be passed to this particular flow. By now you expect in recipe name to have the value that was available in this particular main that was provided by the user. Going inside it, let's look for some other hard-coded values. No, here there are no hard-coded values. Coming down, yeah, here also we have the hard-coded value, but we know this can be replaced by in. Okay, just to make you more comfortable, I have just clicked Ctrl Z to make it to the initial code. Let me go to main, and in this let me open init all applications XAML. In this, launch website, and see we have used something called in-config site URL. You can copy this and you can just paste that here. Okay, so that it will use the dictionary that we have, which will give out the same value that was available here at the beginning. But see, there are few errors over here. In-config is not declared. Because this is not a default XAML given by the RE framework, it will not have the config file in it. If you just go back to the upper level of it, it will see the config file is available here, which you have to be sending into this, but it doesn't have an in config file in it. Let's create it. Just type in config, it is an in type, and here select dictionary. If you save it and go back to process and click on import arguments, here it is. Here you can just pass the config file, which is a dictionary which is available in this process XAML by default. Now if you just go back to, let's close it because they're of no use right now. See, you see there is no error right now here, okay, because in config is available here as we have created it. Okay, fine. Moving forward, we have all these things, but they are not hard coded anywhere. Okay, this thing, whenever, okay, we are writing some file, as we have already discussed, if you remember, we should not leave anything hard coded, okay, because we have a folder called output. Always in that file folder, whatever project file we have, this thing will be creating this, but this can't be sample for all the searches. If for the first time I have taken apple, the second time I take the banana, it should resemble that particular name, right? To do that, I can go here, I can start removing this and click 2 double quotes and 2 pluses, and in between I can pass the in recipe name. So whatever the recipe name is, it will just create the file name with that particular recipe name. And in the options you can see it's asking for the file name, okay, and the text that it should write into it. That's it. So this is also dynamic right now. With that done, let me run it once, but with a message box, because we don't want it to flow from this main process file to this particular set transaction, because we haven't configured this yet. Okay, save it with something like result obtained. Let me go to this main file and I will try to close this and run it once. Okay, it is prompting for the input fruits, then select apple. This all are the message boxes that we have kept earlier. We can remove them. Just launching the site, so it has opened the website. Oh, it's repeating itself. Let's look at the reason. If I just close this and I go backward and see what's happening, because it is not able to execute this particular flow. What's the reason? Search for the recipe window has validation errors. So go over there and click on validate errors. There is an error here. Okay, double click on it and it will take you to that particular flow. Okay, the value that we have passed was not saved, so let's pass it again, recipe, and then save it. Now let's run the validation file again. Okay, fine, this time there is no error. So let's go back to this, close the files that was opened, and let's run it once again. Run. Let's select fruits, then apple, okay, then it is trying to search for apple. We have got the results, and here is the URL. It's trying to navigate to that particular recipe, and here it might take some time to fetch the values. So ingredients was fetched, then we expect the method of preparation, the steps, with fine-tuning you can actually reduce this time. So here are the values, result obtained. Let's go back to this, and here is the full file that we have to look at. It has got the values, the recipe details, but different thing that has happened here is it was created with the recipe name apple instead of sample. Let's go back to it and stop the robot. That was about the process transaction state.